Many WWE superstars left behind more than just legendary moments in the ring. They left behind children, carrying not only their name and legacy, but also their dreams, struggles, and sometimes their pain. From Owen Hart's family still grappling with his tragic fall, to Reid Flair's heartbreaking fate, and even lesser-known stories like Sebastian KD's struggles, these stories go far beyond the squared circle. Some sons tried to follow in their father's footsteps, hoping to carve out their own path in wrestling. Others battled demons far more relentless than any opponent in the ring. Tonight, one of the most controversial names is David Benoit. His father, Chris Benoit, was a technical wrestling genius. Known for his intensity, unmatched work ethic, and unforgettable battles in WCW and WWE, Chris's in-ring legacy was erased overnight in 2007, when the shocking murder-suicide that took his life, his wife Nancy's life, and their son Daniel's life left an irreversible stain on wrestling history. For David, Chris's eldest son, that tragedy changed everything. Still a teenager when it happened, David grew up living with the shadow of his father's actions. WWE completely distanced themselves from Chris Benoit's name, erasing him from history. But David still wanted to honor the wrestling side of his father's legacy. He began training, spending time with stars like Chris Jericho, and even teased a WWE debut. At times, he wore tribute gear to his father, but that same connection made things complicated. Companies were hesitant to sign him because of his last name, and when David publicly wore Benoit tribute gear, WWE reportedly banned him from attending their events altogether. As of today, David Benoit is still a passionate fan, but his dream of stepping into the ring seems more unlikely than ever. Tragedy also struck the Graham family. Eddie Graham was a legend, one of the most influential figures in wrestling history, both as a performer and a promoter. But behind the success was a man battling personal demons. In 1985, Eddie took his own life. His son, Mike Graham, carried the family name into the ring, carving out a career in Florida, wrestling, WCW, and the independent scene. While respected as a skilled technician, Mike never quite escaped his father's shadow. Sadly, history repeated itself. In 2012, Mike also died by suicide, following in the same heartbreaking pattern. Even more devastating, both Mike's grandfather and his own son also took their own lives, making the Graham family's story one of the most tragic in wrestling history. The Flair family's pain is just as unforgettable. Ric Flair, the limousine-riding, jet-flying, 16-time world champion, is considered one of the greatest of all time. His daughter Charlotte has become one of WWE's most successful women's wrestlers, and later competing in Japan and the Indies. But Reid's battles were fought outside the ring. In 2013, at just 25 years old, Reid Flair tragically passed away from an overdose. A life full of promise cut short. Some losses still leave unanswered questions. Jerry the King Lawler is one of wrestling's most iconic figures, but his son, Brian Christopher, lived a turbulent life. Wrestling under the name Brian Christopher, WWE never acknowledged him as Lawler's son on TV. Still, Brian carved out his own career, especially as Grandmaster Sexay in Too Cool, one of the most beloved tag teams of the Attitude Era. But outside the ring, his demons caught up with him. He battled substance abuse, legal troubles, and a rocky relationship with his father. In 2018, Brian was arrested, and just weeks later, he was found hanging in his jail cell. Authorities ruled it a suicide, but Jerry Lawler questioned the circumstances, pointing to bruises and Brian's hopeful conversations about the future. To this day, some fans and family members believe there's more to the story. The Hart family, one of the most storied dynasties in wrestling, has also endured devastating loss. Smith Hart, the eldest son of Stu Hart, wrestled across Canada and Japan, but never achieved the mainstream success of his brothers Brett and Owen. His career was mostly behind the scenes, training and promoting, until cancer claimed his life in 2017. Then, of course, there's Owen Hart. Known for his incredible athleticism and charisma, Owen was beloved by fans worldwide. But on May 23, 1999, tragedy struck. During a stunt at WWE's Over the Edge pay-per-view, Owen fell 78 feet to his death. The accident happened in front of a live crowd and on pay-per-view, forever changing wrestling history. His widow, Martha Hart, later cut ties with WWE completely, preserving his legacy outside the company. Some children of legends tried to forge their own paths, often with mixed results. Shane McMahon, the son of Vince, became a daredevil performer, known for leaping off cells and crashing through glass. He walked away from WWE in 2009, returned in 2016 to a thunderous ovation, but after multiple clashes with his father, he left again in 2024, likely for good. Curtis Axel, son of Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig, showed flashes of greatness, winning the Intercontinental title in 2013, but never lived up to his father's reputation. He quietly faded from WWE in 2020. Jake Carter, son of Vader, once held tag team gold in developmental but was released in 2013, leaving wrestling behind for acting. Brian Pillman Jr., son of the unpredictable Loose Cannon, carried his father's fire into MLW, AEW, and now WWE, where he rebranded himself as Lexis King. Whether he becomes a breakout star remains to be seen, but he continues to honor his father's spirit in a new way. And then there are the Von Erich brothers, Marshall and Ross, sons of Kerry Von Erich. Rather than be consumed by their family's curse, they chose a different path, finding success in MLW, and proving the Von Erich name still means something in professional wrestling. Other stories are even more tragic. Sebastian K.D., the stepson of Ric Flair, was an emerging musician who tragically took his own life in 2024. Sean Studd, son of Big John Studd, honored his father's legacy in the independents, but never broke into WWE. Each story is a reminder that wrestling legacies can be both a blessing and a heavy burden. And then there are the success stories. Cody Rhodes, son of Dusty, carved his own empire outside WWE before returning as one of the company's biggest stars. His brother, Dustin, better known as Goldust, fought personal demons but became one of the most unique characters in wrestling history, still wrestling today. And finally, Dominic Mysterio, once the little boy in the infamous custody storyline between Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio, has now become one of WWE's biggest villains. By betraying his father and aligning with Judgment Day, Dominic has stepped out of his father's shadow and into his own spotlight. Some of these sons carried their father's legacies with pride. Others struggled under the crushing weight of expectation. Some found redemption, some found tragedy, and some are still writing their stories today. But one thing is certain. When you're the child of a wrestling legend, the spotlight never truly fades. Thanks for watching. If you're a true wrestling fan, don't stop here. Check out the videos on your screen for more stories that prove wrestling is about more than just what happens inside the ring. Many WWE superstars left behind more than just legendary moments in the ring. They left behind children, carrying not only their family name, but also the heavy burden of their legacy, their dreams, and in some cases, their pain. And the truth is, what happened to these sons is often more shocking than anything scripted inside the squared circle. Some tried to step into their father's shoes, determined to carry on the family tradition. Others fell victim to demons far more relentless than any opponent. From the son of Chris Benoit fighting to escape the shadow of one of wrestling's darkest tragedies, to Ric Flair's son Reed, who seemed destined for greatness before fate intervened, these are the stories that prove wrestling legacies are often built on both triumph and heartbreak. David Benoit. His father, Chris Benoit, was once considered a technical wrestling genius, respected for his intensity. His unmatched work ethic and unforgettable battles across WCW and WWE, but in 2007, the wrestling world was shattered forever when Benoit committed one of the darkest acts in sports history, taking the lives of his wife Nancy his son Daniel, and ultimately his own. Overnight, his entire legacy was erased from WWE's history. But there was one person who couldn't erase the memory: Chris's surviving son, David. David was only a teenager when his life was turned upside down. Imagine being the son of one of the greatest wrestlers of his generation, only for his name to become synonymous with tragedy. And yet, despite that, David dreamed of stepping into the ring, training alongside stars like Chris Jericho, and even teasing a debut. But here's where the story takes a twist. David reportedly had little in-ring experience, and his last name carried a weight that no company wanted to touch. He revealed in interviews that after wearing tribute gear for his father, WWE outright banned him from their events. His passion for wrestling never died, but the reality is, David Benoit's career never even began. Today, he remains a fan, but the shadow of his father's actions has left his dream permanently stalled. But this isn't the only story where the weight of a family name ended in heartbreak. Take the Graham family. Eddie Graham was not only a star in the ring, but one of the most brilliant promoters in history, building championship wrestling from Florida into a powerhouse. Yet behind the success, Eddie was a man fighting demons, and in 1985, he tragically ended his life. His son, Mike Graham, followed in his footsteps, carving out a respected career in Florida, WCW, and the Independents. But history has a cruel way of repeating itself. In 2012, Mike too took his own life, mirroring his father's fate. Even worse, both Mike's grandfather and his son also died by suicide, making the Graham story one of the most devastating generational tragedies wrestling has ever seen. Now, let's turn to Ric Flair, the 16-time world champion known for the limousines, the jet planes, and the iconic "Woo!" His daughter, Charlotte, became one of the greatest women's wrestlers of all time. But Ric's son, Reed, seemed destined to take the Flair name into the future. Reed was an amateur standout, trained by some of the best, and even wrestled in Japan. He had the pedigree, the talent, and the passion. But behind closed doors, Reed battled substance abuse, a fight Ric Flair himself has admitted he couldn't save him from. And then, in 2013, at just 25 years old, Reed Flair's life was cut short by an overdose. For Ric Flair, who had conquered everything in wrestling, it was the one battle he could never win. Sometimes the tragedies leave behind unanswered questions. Just ask Jerry the King Lawler. A legend in Memphis and a WWE Hall of Famer, Jerry built a career on charisma and skill. But his son, Brian Christopher, lived a much different story. As Grandmaster Sexay in Too Cool, Brian was part of one of the most popular tag teams of the Attitude Era, winning gold and earning the love of fans worldwide. But outside the ring, demons followed him everywhere: legal trouble, arrests, and substance issues. In 2018, after being arrested again, Brian was found hanging in his jail cell. Officials ruled it suicide, but Jerry Lawler didn't believe it. He pointed to bruises on Brian's body, handcuff marks, and even said Brian had been making plans for the future, not someone preparing to take his life. To this day, suspicions linger. Did Brian Christopher really end his own life? Or was there something more? And then, of course, there's Owen Hart. Beloved for his charisma, his athleticism, and his unmatched skill, Owen was on the verge of solidifying his legacy when tragedy struck. On May 23, 1999, at WWE's Over the Edge, Owen was set to descend from the rafters as his superhero alter ego, the Blue Blazer. But a harness malfunction sent him plummeting 78 feet in front of a live crowd. He didn't survive. To this day, it stands as one of wrestling's darkest moments, and Owen's widow, Martha Hart, has made sure his legacy remains separate from WWE forever. And it doesn't stop there. Some sons tried to step out of the shadow, only to find their careers cut short. Curtis Axel, son of Mr. Perfect, won the Intercontinental Championship but never reached the heights fans expected. Jake Carter, son of Vader, showed promise in WWE's developmental system before being released and leaving wrestling behind for acting. Sean Studd, son of Big John Studd, had the size and training, but never broke into WWE. Even Shane McMahon, Vince's son, once seemed destined to take over the company. But after clashes with his father, his WWE journey ended for good in 2024. Yet, among the heartbreak, there are glimmers of success. Brian Pillman Jr., son of the unpredictable Loose Cannon, is now in WWE under the name Lexis King, determined to make a name for himself. Marshall and Ross Von Erich, sons of Kerry, chose a different path, finding success in MLW and carving out their own careers while keeping their family name alive. And then there are the Rhodes brothers. Cody Rhodes walked away from WWE, helped build AEW, and then shocked the world by returning to WWE as one of its biggest stars. His brother Dustin, known as Goldust, battled personal demons, but found redemption and respect, delivering some of his greatest matches later in his career. Thanks for watching. If you're a true wrestling fan, don't stop here. Click the videos popping up on your screen for even more untold stories from the world of wrestling.